From Kenner's Star Wars collection, it's the Landspeeder.
Wow, it looks like it's floating. Here come the sand people. It's up from Skywalker and these Landspeeders to get us out.
Action figures each sold separately.
Better check the turbo reactor and fill the space hatch with supplies. Hurry, they're advancing. Wait for R2-D2 and C-3PO. Activate spring glide wheels. The Force goes with us.
The Star Wars Landspeeder. Action figures sold separately. New from Kenner.
Welcome to another episode of the Star Wars Fan-Addict. It's been a little while since my last video, but as the saying goes, life is what happens when you're making plans for other things. Anyways, welcome back. Before we get started, just a comment or two about the commercial. In particular, the awful 70s bowl hair helmet that's sported by this kid. Who thought this looked good, and why? We all had it. Me too. Which is why I have license to poke some fun at it. What were our parents thinking? Did they want future ridicule to fall upon us on some future video sharing website on a yet uninvented internet? Where the world, or in my channel's case, nearly dozens of people can see? Well, maybe not, but spray some polyurethane on that do, bolt on a face mask, add your favorite team's logo, and that kid's ready.
Are you ready for some football?
Or maybe it was just an early start for Halloween. Okay, anyway, welcome back, and on with the video. In today's video, we're going to be doing a little surgery on these Landspeeders. As you can see, these speeders are in pretty decent shape to start with. However, they are missing a couple of parts. This first speeder is in need of a set of seats. Our second speeder has a broken shifter arm. I attempted a repair that didn't hold. I found this 95 Power of the Force 2 speeder on eBay for just a couple of bucks. It looked to me to be the perfect parts donor. What appeared to be the only differences in the parts were the color, gray instead of black, and the seats were pleated to give them more detail. These speeders were practically alike and appeared to be made from the same old Kenner molds with just some minor detail additions. So we're going to start with a little bit of surgery. There's 4 screws up at the top and 2 screws down at the bottom. The vintage speeder has only 2 screws at the top and 2 at the bottom. Okay, now with the screws out, should be able to get this apart pretty easy. With a lot of effort, I finally got this apart. The 95 speeders are not exactly like the vintage speeders as I had first thought. The vintage speeders are held together by only their screws and easily come apart after you take them out. The newer speeders are glued together in several locations around the body, making them very difficult to take apart without utterly destroying them. You can see I snapped off several pins in the process. It should also be of note that the mechanisms are very different. A redesign of the spring undercarriage was made in the 95 speeders. The undercarriage is attached to the top of the speeder with screws instead of just resting in the bottom of the speeder as in the vintage model. The springs are then only acting as shock absorbers, giving the floating illusion. The vintage springs are connected directly to the hull, which may have had something to do with their fragility. The newer designs look like it is sturdier and should last better than the vintage, in my opinion. That being said, bear in mind that the mechanisms are not interchangeable between the two. I did get the seats out, and I'm going to put them into this one here. 95 seats mount in differently, with tabs that are glued into the base, in addition to the original slide and snap-in grooves. So this thing was a bear and a half to get out of there. The shifter, I believe, is exactly the same as the original, except for the color. So now that I have my original apart, you can see here exactly how different the two chassis are underneath. Again, this is the bottom part of the chassis with the hover undercarriage attached to it. The Power of the Force 2 undercarriage is attached to the top part, held in by springs, held in by screws. So certainly the Power of the Force 2 is a hardier version of the original. And I think the spring design on the newer one is a better design than these. And these are very also fragile springs. So, and the part we're after was replace this shifter here. Here you can see the difference between the old one and the newer one. And my old one is just so brittle, it's just going to pieces. You can see there where I tried to plaster weld on some pieces on the outside to help hold it together, but it would just break somewhere further down the line. Okay, so now we've got the new shifter in place of the old one. It looks like it fits just fine. Okay, so got the speeder back together. And just so you can see, it functions just fine. Just as it should. And this speeder should be a little bit easier to do since we don't have to take it apart. Just have to kick out our Uber driver and rider. And we'll take the seats. And as you can tell, even though it had the extra tabs in it, it still has the little slots on the inside from the originals, just like the originals, so they should snap right into place, hopefully. Right into place. Good as new. Well, almost. Okay, so now they're both back together, and as you can see, I think they look a little bit better, or at least a little more complete. Again, not trying to fool anybody. These are not original parts in here, but still they're functional and they look better than just with missing parts. We did learn a few things. Apparently not 100% of this, even though it's made from the same mold, or nearly the same mold, it's not 100% backwards compatible. But many of the parts will work just fine on the vintage speeders. So if you like this video and you want to see more content like it, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next time.